Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, cocoa over gold. Ghana's parliament cracks down on the sale or repurposing of land used to grow the country's most important crop. Farmers turning to illegal mining face the toughest penalties as Accra races to protect cacao cultivation. Also, DR Congo is set to open its largest ever Ebola treatment facility. Construction's finishing up at the site in Bunia as the country continues to battle a fast-growing outbreak of a disease that's claimed over 1,700 lives since mid-May. And a deeply moving Rwandan movie ramps up action across the country's cinema scene. Ben Imana became the first Rwandan submission to win the coveted Camera d'Or at Cannes. And since then, the spotlight has locally illuminated others' passion for film. But first, protecting Ghana's cocoa industry is proving to be a tough nut to crack. Farmers are furious after Parliament passed a law that bans the sale or use of cocoa-growing land for anything else. Now, the changes are aimed at propping up the crucial industry. Production levels have plummeted to below 600,000 metric tons a year, when just 4 years ago, that stood at over 1 million tonnes. Climate change is part of the problem, but MPs are also trying to stop farmers using their land to illegally mine for gold, as our Justice Baidu tells us.
This new law has sparked some level of disquiet among cocoa farmers who make up to 1 million of Ghana's population across the country, as gold prices continue to soar on the market in the world with the plummeting of cocoa prices. Farmers of the crop have now been forced into the practice of leasing out their farmland to gold miners who pay hefty amounts to them in return for their land. With this new law, any farmer caught in this act risk being jailed up to 20 years. This new law also makes it compulsory for the government to pay 70% of the reigning world market price to the farmers of the crop. Ordinarily, this should be good news, but in January this year, the government slashed the price of the crop by 30% when there was a collapse in the world market price, and farmers have been left fuming since. As a result, many of them are looking at these new proposals with skepticism. The world's second leading producer of cocoa is being forced to implement some of these far-reaching measures in order to claw back some of its losses as it continues to reduce the level of volume that it produces annually. Now produces around 600,000 as of this year. Only 5 years ago, Ghana was producing more than 1 million metric tons of cocoa a year.
Justice Baidu there for us in Accra. Now, Africa's richest man is set to launch Africa's biggest ever stock exchange listing. Aliko Dangote is reportedly preparing to sell a minority stake in his huge Lagos oil refinery as he tries to raise about $5 billion to expand its capacity. Now, it's benefited from global fuel shortages caused by the Iran war and has been selling more barrels across Africa and to West Europe. Now, the initial public offering is expected to wrap up in October, and stock exchanges in South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, Ghana and Rwanda have been ramping up meetings to try and set up systems to allow more regional investors to take part in the deal. Now, the listing is a shift towards more African capital financing the continent's mega infrastructure projects. Well, Cameroon's President Paul Biya is still nowhere to be publicly seen, but that has not stopped him from some pretty substantial shakeups at the top. The world's oldest head of state reshuffled military leadership this week, but the 93-year-old has not been seen since June 7th, and his absence is fueling mounting criticism and questions about his health. Indira Ayak tells us more.
While there are still speculations about his whereabouts and health situation, Cameroon's long-serving leader Paul Biya has reshuffled the country's military. In 3 separate decrees signed from Geneva, Switzerland, Paul Biya promoted the head of the Presidential Guard from Colonel to Brigadier General. He also replaced commanders in 4 of the country's 5 joint military regions. This will not be the first time the 93-year-old has reshuffled the military while on a private trip out of the country. The circumstances under which the latest changes were made have sparked debates, especially amongst social media users. Paul Biya has not been seen in public since the 7th of June when he left Cameroon for what was described by his team as a brief private stay abroad. Now, there were speculations a couple of weeks that he was unwell and hospitalized at a clinic in Geneva, Switzerland. Several government officials, including the Minister of Communication, have debunked news of his sickness, stating that he is alive and will return to the country soon. Many in Cameroon have criticized the lack of information about his activities and the uncertainty surrounding the duration of his foreign trip.
Indira there for us. Now, this week, DR Congo is set to open its largest ever facility for treating Ebola. The country is still in the midst of the fastest growing outbreak of the disease, with 1,707 deaths recorded on Tuesday so far since mid-May. Clarice Fortuné tells us more.
Health workers in eastern DR Congo are stepping up the fight against Ebola. This new treatment center in Bunia is said to be the country's biggest, designed to treat the growing number of patients.
The work is nearing completion. It's a 100-bed facility with 60 beds for confirmed cases and 40 beds for suspected cases. More than 300 staff members will be working at the center, and we're counting on the community to help accelerate the process of identifying cases.
The epidemic was caused by the rare Bundibugyo strain of the virus, for which there are no approved vaccines or treatments. But WHO says research protocols developed before the epidemic's onset have helped speed up testing of new treatments.
If you compare this outbreak to previous Ebola outbreaks, we have been able to start the trials more quickly. So that is a promising progress in the way we are doing the R&D, because the protocols were written before the outbreak started. So this is the whole way that the whole world of research related to outbreaks has been trying to shift, that we do as much as possible ahead of time.
The Bundibugyo strain of the virus has spread at an exceptional pace since the outbreak was declared in May. More than 3,700 confirmed cases and over 1,650 deaths have now been recorded, making it the country's largest Ebola outbreak on record. Several experimental vaccines and treatments are now advancing simultaneously, raising hopes that the world's fastest-growing Ebola outbreak could finally have effective tools to slow its spread.
Now, Rwandan cinema has never enjoyed such a spotlight. At Cannes in May, Marie-Clémentine Dusa-Bejambo's film Benimana won the coveted Camera d'Or for the first time for a Rwandan feature. Now, the spotlights illuminated the wider local film scene in Rwanda, inspiring both filmmakers and fans. Aurore Bayu tells us more.
In the streets of Kigali, Rwandan director Moise Ganza scouts locations for his first feature film. For years, with no real film industry or local funding, cinema relied entirely on the determination of its filmmakers.
There's something special about filmmaking here. I don't know if it's because the country's small or because Kigali is a small city, but there's a real sense of community. We've faced the same challenges for so long. Helping each other and collaborating wasn't a choice. It was a necessity.
Just a few steps away, Mayaka Cinema is rising from the ashes. Closed in 2019, this 1970s theater was rescued by 2 young directors who turned it into the country's last operating cinema and the home of a film club.
Because we feel like films are not just for entertainment, they are also deep and they can convey a lot. And now that we've been taken over by content and people scrolling, we don't want what we show to be reduced to, we're going to just watch some images. It's really curated
Further on the pedestrian esplanade of Imbuga City Walk, a giant screen hosts the open-air screenings of the 4th Kigali Cine Junction Festival, backed by government, foreign cultural institutes and local businesses.
It coming from Africans, it coming from Black people as well, is a bit more contextualized and layered because it comes from lived experiences. So I think it is important, and it's equally important for us to show up for these films as well, so we can learn, we can see our stories.
The government has now launched its own creative grants initiative, co-financed equally with foreign partners. The first undersigned Kigali now sees cinema as a driver of jobs.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.